People thought that Meryl Streep and Don Gummer's relationship was one of the strongest in Hollywood for a long time. An event, a famous person, or the time cannot change this marriage. One event, though, broke everything she thought she could hold together. Even though they had a respectful relationship, what was the hardest thing for Meryl to do in her life? She had to end a 45-year relationship that had been her home for so long. Few people have seen a side of Meryl Streep that the truth shows, and it's much darker than what the media said. The day when everything changed in a quiet way. As Meryl Streep and Don Gummer navigated the rough waters of Hollywood during their nearly 50-year marriage, they stayed strong in their love for each other. They raised 4 children together and were able to stay together through hard times that would have broken most people. He worked alone. She worked for other people. At first, though, not even close friends could fully understand how their private lives had changed around 2017. Nobody knew about it, and it wasn't a big deal. It was calm, slow, and full of details. There was no doubt about what was going on when everyone saw them at the 2018 Oscars. They didn't tell anyone that the love part of their marriage was over. They were married for decades and had children, grandkids, and many memories together. But that was more than 6 years ago. It shocked everyone that Meryl kept wearing her wedding band. Not even at public events, red carpets, or interviews did she take it off. In October 2023, she was seen at the Princess of Asturias Awards in Spain with her ring still on. Fans and reporters thought nothing had changed, but it did. People were shocked when People magazine finally said they were splitting up in late 2023. However, the statement showed something even stranger than was thought. It took years for anyone to find out about the breakup. A rep for Meryl Streep says that the two of them have not been together in over 6 years. They have chosen to live separate lives, but they will always love each other. The schedule shows that they broke up in a quiet way around the time they sold their long-term Tribeca apartment in 2020, and Meryl moved into a mid-century house in Pasadena that she had bought in 2017. It took Meryl a long time to accept that her marriage was over because of a scandal or bed cheating. There was no way to fix the mental gap. That much was clear. It was like she could never go back after something inside her changed. Quiet compromise, balance, and alone time are all signs of a strong marriage. To really understand what was lost, you have to think about how Meryl Streep and Don Gummer built one of the most successful working relationships in Hollywood history. In 1978, they met in terrible conditions. The news that Meryl's beloved John Cazale had died of lung cancer broke her heart. She thought they would spend the rest of their lives together. Don Gummer came into her life as a permanent fixture, not as a replacement, in a time when her life seemed to be falling apart. He gave her the support, love, and care she so badly needed. 6 months after they met, they got married, and it looked like they would never be apart for many years. Meryl and Don's life was peaceful and calm, unlike the lives of many famous couples who had to deal with constant attention. People all over the world knew her face. She changed the face of American movies, won Oscars, and gave performances that will live on forever. From the early 1970s on, his stone and metal statues and silent structures began to be shown in galleries. He worked in the dark, happy with a life based on rules, hard work, and quiet, while she stood in bright lights, known to everyone. But it wasn't easy to keep this balance. Many times, Meryl talked about how hard it was on her emotions to be an actor full-time and raise 4 kids. She told Vogue in 2002, "Marriage is like a big conversation that needs understanding, compromise, and knowing when to keep quiet. I have a holistic need to work and to have huge ties of love in my life," she said, explaining how she felt torn between 2 important parts of her life. As a mother, she reached the end of her mental and physical strength. Her oldest daughter, Mamie, was born in 1983. Henry was her son, born in 1979. Grace was her daughter, born in 1986. And Louisa was her daughter, born in 1991. Due to Don's growing art business, movie schedules, and pregnancies, the marriage was often changed. Meryl often said that being a mother was harder than acting. A lot of people like her playing. But she was always unsure because she was a mom. For whatever reason, they were able to stay married because they set limits that kept each other safe. The media wasn't allowed to write about their personal life, and they didn't talk about their relationship much in interviews or at Hollywood parties. This method worked perfectly for decades. But the thing that kept them safe for years turned into something that stopped them from going forward. Not anyone seems to know that two people are living different lives and growing farther apart from each other. The slow, drifting apart two lives is called the steady drift. When two married people split up, it's often like a storm, loud, crazy, and hard to ignore. But for Meryl Streep and Don Gummer, it slowly fell apart. There wasn't a big fight or a showy conflict, and the tabloids weren't after them. Instead, the change started out as a small, barely noticeable difference that got bigger over time until it was too big to fail to notice. Slowly, the first signs about 2017 started to show up. Meryl bought a mid-century home in Pasadena, which was very different from the life she had been living with Don on the East Coast since the late 1970s. Over time, the distance between them grew emotional as Don stuck to his artistic routines, and she had to move across the country for work. They were no longer moving together. They were moving at the same speed. 3 years later, in early 2020, they sold their beloved 3,950 square foot Tribeca apartment for $15,000. After 14 years, they were given $8 million. After being on the market for a few months, the price was cut by a major amount. The cost, however, didn't matter. That's what I think it meant. They had shared a penthouse for projects, kids, shows, and important events. At that point, neither of them could really explain why letting go of it felt like the end of a chapter. In spite of this, Meryl kept wearing her wedding band. After seeing her ring at the Princess of Asturias Awards event in Spain in September 2023, many people thought she was still married. Fans thought the ring was a promise to stay loyal. People inside saw something different. The ring wasn't a gift. As a way to remember what happened over the past 50 years, it was built. Things were a lot more complex than that. Official proof released in October 2023 showed that Meryl and Don had been split up for more than 6 years before anyone knew about it. They loved each other very much, even though they had decided to live apart. It was a subtle nod to what they had already agreed on behind closed doors. They broke up in silence to say that their feelings had changed too much for them to fix, but it did not mean the end of their marriage. They were not mad. They were not mad. After giving everything they had, only two people understood that love could only last for so long. The event that really changed Meryl's life, though, happened before anyone knew about it. To understand it, you need to think back to the worst parts of her childhood, one that held on tight and never let go. The shade of John Cazale, A Lasting Love. To see how her final choice changed her, you have to go back to 1978, a long time before the Oscars, before she became famous around the world, and before she met Don Gummer. That year, Meryl lost someone so important to her that it changed all of her relationships after that. She loved John Cazale very much and lived with him. He died of lung cancer when he was 42 years old. But Meryl saw him as more than just a partner or friend. He was already famous for his parts in movies like The Godfather, Dog Day Afternoon, and The Deer Hunter. He was a solid base, a bright light, and one with my soul. He got sick pretty quickly. He died even more quickly. At age 29, Meryl was trying to stay alive in secret while being miserable in public. She once said that time felt like her life had fallen apart. When she talked about John in interviews over the years, she always showed a mix of respect and sadness. This showed how much he affected her as a person and as an actress. Meryl moved out of the apartment she shared with John just a few weeks after he died. She stayed with Don Gummer, who was friends with her brother, while she worked to change her life. What started as a safe place to heal turned into a friendship over time. They got married after 6 months. It was a big step toward faith that helped her get better, but her past was still there. A widespread misunderstanding is that sadness goes away on its own. Meryl knew that wasn't a good idea. Grief never really goes away, even though it shows up in different ways. John was a quiet figure in her mind for years. That memory changed the way she thought about love, loyalty, and loss. The first pain never went away, even when she was happy with Don. Even though she had this mental scar, her love for Don stayed strong, and their dedication to each other did not fade. However, it became an important part of her life for good. An important component that altered her later relationships, love, and handling of mental distance. Things from her past that she hadn't dealt with started to bother her in strange ways as she and Don started to grow apart. It hurt, but it was clear she had been through a terrible loss before, so she knew what it was like to go through it again. This time, death wasn't going to take anyone away. It was time, change, and the slow weakening of their emotional tie. She knew something had to change after that realization. They have to deal with fame, time, and living two very different lives. Over time, stress can happen in even the strongest couples. But the stress is much higher when one partner becomes famous around the world and the other decides to live a quiet life as an artist. Soon, Meryl Streep was known all over the world. Movies like Mamma Mia, The Iron Lady, and Kramer vs. Kramer came out over the years. And further, award season, movie sets, interviews, and fans' hopes for her seemed to make her more well-known. Don Gummer's surroundings, on the other hand, stayed stable, reliable, and personal. His statues were shown in art shows from Boston to Los Angeles. Even though he never tried to be famous or popular, he was happy when he did rituals, was still, or made things. At first, their difference helped them stay grounded, but over time, it turned into a speed difference. Meryl moved as fast as movies do. Don walked like a painter. They worked hard for years to keep that balance. Meryl used to say that getting married meant you had to be able to chill out, be flexible, and give up some things. In interviews, she was honest about how hard it is to raise 4 kids while respecting each other's jobs, go to parent-teacher conferences and red carpet events, and how parenting is harder than performing. She meant every word she said. But as time went on, something changed. It was Hollywood that pushed her to do more. Not just her time, but also how she felt. Don's busy routine of interviews, public appearances, sets, and constant attention didn't go well with his calmer way of life. Her fame grew, and his distance from the fame world grew. They were not arguing. They were not mad. To put it simply, they were growing in different ways. 2 people can feel different kinds of loneliness when they still like each other but have different ideas about things. It was impossible to avoid being alone by the end of the 2010s. They weren't fighting each other. The only thing they did was float. They planned to stay together. Over time, their mental lives were becoming more and more different. When they sold the Tribeca apartment in 2020, it was the last place they lived together. In addition, Meryl's new home in Pasadena showed her a deeper truth. In both their minds and their bodies, they were no longer living their lives in the same place. Not every thought hit me at the same time. Meryl realized that the marriage had changed along with them while they were alone. At that point, she knew she had to let go because hanging on would have hurt her more than letting go. After 45 years of calm, accepting love, the story came to an end. Finally, Meryl Streep came to terms with the fact that her marriage was over. There was no big fight, no dramatic outburst, and no bad press. What came next, a sudden realization, was the real tragedy. She became aware that both she and Don Gummer had changed on the inside. She also knew that the respect that had kept them together for almost 50 years would be hurt if they stayed together out of fear, habit, or custom. They broke up in private with the same respect that had been a part of their relationship from the start. Nobody said anything mean, no lawyers shared information, and no insiders told reporters what they were talking about. Before anyone else found out, they chose to live apart in secret for more than 6 years. They always put their kids' needs ahead of what other people wanted to know. They made sure that birthdays, family gatherings, and grandchildren were all separate but still linked. Meryl kept wearing her wedding ring to public events after they broke up. This wasn't an act of denial. It was a quiet acceptance of the life they had made together. They wore the ring to remember how much they loved each other. Even through decades of supporting each other in their work, the demands of fame, and the presence of their 4 children and 5 grandkids. Fans could tell she was steady because she had the ring on her finger while she was on stage at the 2023 Princess of Asturias Awards in Spain. Respect was shown in real life. The official word was finally given in a letter sent to people in October 2023. It was clear, easy to understand, and very real. Meryl Streep and Don Gummer haven't been together in over 6 years. They have chosen to live separate lives. but they will always love each other. There was no fighting, no anger, and no lying. After 45 years together, their lives are going in different directions. Meryl is still doing great work. Her most recent movie, Only Murders in the Building, was a big hit. Their paths have taken different turns, but their love, memories, and gratitude are still the same. Don keeps committing himself to his simple, quiet, and meaningful life as an artist. In the end, this is the sad truth. There was nothing wrong that caused them to break up. Life had changed, so it was over. Instead of fighting the change, they chose to easily accept it. How do you feel about the fact that Meryl and Don got a divorce after 45 years of marriage? Do you think that some encounters change over time, like this close-up look? Sign up, like the movie, and leave a review below to get more stories about the most interesting people in Hollywood.